Many people talk about the ups and downs of married life, but no one really prepares you for life after your spouse passes away. Welcome to Widowhood Real Talk with Tina, a safe place for widows, widowers, and their friends and family to talk about love and loss. Find comfort as you listen to honest conversations between Tina and invited guests who've experienced the loss of their forever partner. Share their stories of love, grief, and healing. You are not alone in this journey. Join today's episode and discover a wealth of resources and learn how to connect with others who are traveling the same path. This is Widowhood Real Talk with Tina.
Hello, Emily Curtis. Welcome to the Widowhood.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Tina.
You're welcome. When you hear welcome to the Widowhood, what comes to your mind first?
Oh, that's a great question. I think what comes to my mind is probably a band or a group of people that are going through a similar situation, right? Like the widowhood is, we're all widows and we're a club that we never wanted to join. A lot of people say that as well, not just myself, but a club we never wanted to join, but here we are, and we are trying to figure out how to move forward and how to, make the best of a terrible situation. And I think a widowhood is a group of people that understand each other's pain and are able to, hopefully support each other through podcasts like this and other things like that.
Wow. Thank you. I've heard that term that it's a club nobody wanted to join, but I believe we did because we took vows to want to join this club.
It's a good way of thinking about it. I think it's interesting, right? Like it is in a way a gift, the partner, the spouse that passes first, right? They never have to grieve the other. And so falling in love, you open your heart to others and you open your heart to being hurt. I feel like maybe it's a club I never wanted to join because I lost my husband when I was 45 years old. I was not ready to be in that club at 45 years old. I felt like we still had a lifetime to live together. And so certainly none of my friends are widowed or were widowed at the time. And so
Right.
it was a challenging place to be.
I definitely can see that. I'm learning the duality of we fulfilled our wedding vows, but the cost of that is pain.
That's right.
And it's interesting to me that it seems like people that are widows are shunned, but people that are divorced are celebrated.
Interesting.
It seems as if you'll have those, ooh, I got divorce party, da 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 da, and
Right.
they're out there celebrating that, but I feel like where's our party? Like I feel like it's a difference between maybe somebody, a professional athlete versus a teacher.
Yeah.
A teacher is doing something different, but the pay disparity is kind of obvious to me. I
Yeah,
feel like that way.
that's it's a good point. I think what I have felt as a widow is, that it's not okay for me to talk about my late husband, right? Like when you get divorced, you don't start dating, and when you're dating, you're not talking about your ex-husband. You're not going to parties with your new partner, talking about your ex-husband. And I find myself still talking about my late husband. And I do have a new partner in my life, and he's
Well, you
fine
can
with
skip
it.
to it real quick. We haven't even, no, slow down. Okay, all right. Let me start navigating this conversation. What is your late husband's name?
My late husband's name was Brad.
His name is still Brad. What was Brad's favorite color?
Red.
Red. Nice.
Yes.
What did he have that was red?
He liked a lot of colors. His mother was Korean.
Okay.
So red in Korean culture is good luck. So it was always a symbol of good luck in terms of red items in our household and things of that nature. So red was, and he was just he's a very bold character. So red certainly fit him.
Nice. I just see the way you light up just thinking about him. How did you and Brad meet?
Brad and I met in 1998, and I had just moved to Colorado, and he had been living here for about 4 years. And I met him through work, and about a month after I moved to Colorado, and
Oh,
we started dating right away, and we took our time. It took us 9 years to get married, and we were
wow.
yeah, we were married for 15 years when he passed. So we had been together for a total of 24 years.
So you literally had a lifetime, Brad.
I had a lifetime with Brad. Yes, I was young when I met him.
Mm.
At the time I didn't think I was young, but looking back, I was definitely young. And we went through a lot. We moved. We had a period of time when we were waiting for a home to be built, where we lived in our camper for like
Oh,
9 months
okay.
because we had nowhere to live with two of our dogs. So we went through a lot, and he really was, it's cliche, but it's true. He really was my best friend. And we just really enjoyed life together. We really enjoyed the same activities and the same experiences. And, he was everything. He was everything to
Wow.
me.
When you think of relationships and people say we're having a hard time, what did you learn in your relationship with Brad as far as enduring hard times in a relationship?
Certainly, we as any couple had hard times. I mentioned we met young, and I think you change a lot. And I met him in my early 20s. You change a lot in your 30s. And certainly that 9 months we lived in our camper was challenging. And I think it's just trying to, one thing that Brad was really good at, and he taught me, and I still practice, is really trying to be present in the moment. So although life may be challenging today, or life was challenging yesterday, it doesn't mean that life's going to be challenging in the future. So really trying to take one day at a time, break things down into small pieces, put things into perspective. And both of us had lost, he lost his mother, I lost my father during our marriage. And so like there were tough times that I'm not going to say was like, oh, put a positive spin on it, everything's going to be fine. But I think supporting each other through the hard times, and really being able to remember while you're together, and have hope, better days are ahead, as long as you work together as a team, and you support each other and you make that happen.
Thank you for that. You mentioned something I'd like to circle back to, Emily. You mentioned about not growing apart. You met in your 20s. I
Mhm.
oftentimes hear people say, I'm not who I was when I met them, and we've grown apart. How did you and Brad prevent that from happening?
I think probably our shared interest and our support group. And I still to this day enjoy an incredible, incredible group of friends that we did a lot with. So we weren't isolated, I guess. And we did change. And I think we respected each other for the changes that we made. Certainly when I met him, I wasn't a career woman yet. And then I became a very focused career person, and he was not. He was more work with his hands, but I think we balanced each other, and we tried to respect each other for our strengths. And I think our ability to constantly just have fun together, and I mentioned, I live in Colorado. I met him in Colorado, and we just were avid skiers and hikers and mountain bikers and camping. And we had this great circle of friends that we would enjoy that with. And I think that kept things grounded. We kept ourselves grounded, I think is probably a good way of thinking about it.
Okay, you mentioned something also I'd like to talk about friends.
Mm-hmm.
Did your friends remain after Brad's passing?
110%. I'm extremely, extremely fortunate.
You and I share that
Mhm.
common experience,
Yes.
but I'm sure you have spoken to many widows and widowers, and that is not their case. What do you say to someone that is struggling because their friendship base has fully shifted?
Yeah, I think there's a couple ways that you can approach it. One is I like to tell other widows to be proactive in their relationships, right? So I hear often that couple friends maybe don't invite the widow to a couple's party. And, you know, often I say, have you talked to your friends who had the party? Did you ask maybe why you weren't invited? Or have you, because potentially they're doing it because they think they're protecting you.
Yes.
When in reality, maybe they don't really, maybe they're like, you know what? We didn't think you'd want to be part of it. Well, actually, yes, I do want to be part of it. So maybe next time they will invite you. There's obviously more difficult situations where it's very obvious that the friendship has dissolved. And again, I go to that proactive outreach. Like, are there groups in your community that you can join where you share similar interests or activities, other bereavement groups, things of that nature? I know, when Brad passed, we had just moved to this brand new town. I didn't know anyone. And that was really what I did, was I really just tried to reach out. I connected with other widows. I connected with women who like to mountain bike and ski, which I did. And I made new friendships. And those new friendships were grounded in who I was at that moment. And, friends come and go in our lives. It's really hard when you lose a lot of friends in your life. But I think I'd also say friends that walk away from you during this time in your life maybe weren't the people that you were meant to be friends with forever, right?
Mhm.
Because, your real friends will really stick by you. And so I think part of it's like, reframe yourself a little bit of like, am I isolating? Am I not reaching out? You do have to reach out. I know I did. I had to really make an effort to reach out, because people go back to their lives, right? Like the memorial happens, the funeral happens, and people go back to life and they get busy. And so we can't, I think as widows, we can't always expect everybody to reach out. Some people will, but it's important that you also try to stay connected. And then if the friendship is just obviously dissolving, then maybe that's meant to be as well.
Some really good advice there. It seems as if you have taken a proactive approach to your grief journey.
Yes.
Is that how you approach life overall, or is that something that just happened in this particular version of your life?
Yeah, I like to say that I feel like I'm a really resilient person. I spent my childhood, high school, college. I was a swimmer. I was a national swimmer, and through that, there was a lot of disappointment. Probably more disappointments than happiness. And so I learned really quickly in life that did things happen in your life that aren't what you planned or aren't what you like or want what you wanted, and you have the ability to move forward from that. It happened throughout my 20s and 30s with my career, right? Jobs that I missed. I got laid off from a job that I loved. And it's like, how did I keep moving forward? Now, I will say with my grief, it was a lot harder
Right.
to just sort of like pick up and move forward. But I think deep inside, after the initial shock wore off, I always knew that I wanted to be able to move forward. I wanted to be happy again. I wanted to have joy. I wanted to live the life that I had planned to live, even though he was no longer here. And so, yeah, I think life experiences had prepared me in a lot of ways to be able to proactively manage my grief. Now, I also will say I did a lot of therapy. I did a lot of work. I listened to tons of podcasts. I read books. Like I didn't just say, oh, I want to get better. I actually took the proactive steps, to get better, or not to get better. That's probably not the right, to heal from the grief. So yeah, I think it is a little bit of my personality. My therapist said to me in one of our first sessions, she said, Emily, I think you're trying to put your head down and power through your grief. And I said,
You wouldn't have been
oh,
the first.
yeah, I was like, oh, 100%. And she's like, yeah, no, it doesn't work
Yes.
like that. Just like, just power through, like it's going to be, she's like, it doesn't work like that. And so, I had to do the work, and I had to grieve to kind of, heal from it.
I'm actually glad that you mentioned the idea of powering through,
Mhm.
because we'll often hear people say, in time, it'll just get better.
Mhm.
You'll be fine after a few years. When you hear that, what comes to mind for you?
It's very well-meaning advice, but for us that have had significant losses in our life, like losing a spouse, it does take time to get better. However, time itself will not heal. You have to take the time, I think, to grieve, to feel, to go through the emotions. And oftentimes, there's just a lot of people that need support. So like reaching out for professional help, bereavement groups, whatever that looks like for you, that's helpful. yeah, I think the response I would give is well-meaning advice, but it's time heals all wounds, and you also kind of have to be proactive and getting yourself to feel better.
I can relate to that.
Hmm.
You mentioned about needing to reach out and stay connected. A person in that regards in their grief and they're thinking, I'm just tired trying to survive. They should come to me.
Hmm.
What would you tell them in that conversation?
I think it's relative to where you are in your grief. I certainly would not give that advice to somebody in the first, month, 2, 3, 4 months even. I think there reaches a point in certainly in my grief and other widows that I've talked to where you're starting to get, I like to say, a little bit of reprieve from the day to day.
Grief fog is lifting.
Yeah, and you're like, okay, maybe I can go out to eat again. Maybe I
Yeah.
can go enjoy these activities. And I think it's in the context of that, you know, I will say the winter that after Brad passed, that for me, that was about 6 months after Brad passed. And it was winter here in Colorado, and winter can be very isolating. And every weekend I made plans because I knew that I could not be on weekends. I work from home, I'm alone all week. And I just knew if I spent weekends alone, I would spiral. And so I just was every weekend, I would just touch base with friends and, do you want to go have dinner? Do you want to do this? Do you want to come visit? I'll come visit. And so I think it's in the context of that, of when you're at that point, you're ready to get back into life, you know, reach out. There's people out there that are probably happy that you're ready to do those
Yeah,
things, and they want to support you in that journey of your grief. There's those friends that want to be in the thick of it with you at the beginning, and then there's those friends that are like, great, but we'd love to take you out to dinner. We'd love to have you, over for brunch or whatever it is. Just keeping in touch with friends and family, and making sure that you're not isolating.
thank you. You made a really good point about sometimes they think that they're protecting us, that
Mhm.
they've made up in their mind, she doesn't or he does not want to be around couples. The things that people imagine trigger us are generally not the things that really trigger us. For me, I love being with couples and embracing that love and almost like tell them, like, make sure you hold on to them. Don't argue about the crazy stuff. Now you
Right.
play a Eagle song, I'm hot garbage.
Hmm.
Or I'm in the grocery store walking by the Oreos because Mark loved Oreo cookies and
Right.
Chip Ahoy's. That took me on a spiral more than couples getting together and playing games.
Yes.
But we do have to give them permission and we actually have to educate them because
Sure.
most of our friends, as you mentioned, being young, have not traveled the path we're on. So why would we expect them to have the knowledge, the emotional bandwidth on how to navigate it?
That's exactly it. I mean, that's exactly right. And I think, there's just a lot of well-meaning advice, well-meaning behavior that happens after somebody loses a spouse, or, and oftentimes I think that's a little bit of what I was saying. It's just a matter of I don't, sometimes they're not leaving you out on because they don't care or want you there. They maybe are thinking about it differently than you are. So,
Yeah,
just I have had people say, "Gosh, I just love how much you still talk about Brad." And I really say, "Well, of course, like he was with me for 24 years. I'll never stop talking about him." But there's
exactly.
people that will say, "Oh, I didn't want to bring his name up because I wasn't sure if that would make you sad." I say, "No, be happy. Like I love to
Yeah.
talk about our life together. That actually brings me joy." And to your point, there's other triggers that but it's not that. And so I think you're right. It's like we have to educate people, and I always say I'm a real open book about my grief. I'm happy to talk about the experience, where I was, where I am, what happened to Brad, any of it, because I think it helps other widows, but it also helps people who are supporting widows to
Mm.
understand how they can help support their friend or their family member, and make sure that, as we talked about, that they're not making up their own story about what that person may or may not need.
When you think of Brad, and some favorite memories. Would you share one with us?
Oh, goodness. There's so many. Favorite, I mean, obviously,
One or two, whatever
yeah,
crosses your mind.
I'd share our wedding day was
Okay.
amazing. I mean, that's an obvious one. I mentioned it before, Brad and I were really adventure seekers. So
Mm.
there's so many memories of us. You know, One of the things we loved to do was to just travel down dirt roads in Colorado and
Oh,
find the most secluded camping spot we could, where we
okay.
didn't see anyone else, we didn't hear anyone else. And, that was just our time. And it was us and our dogs, and we would just drive around and, just be together in these really simple moments. I think some of the memories of Brad that bring me the most joy are some of the most simple
Mm.
memories. It's just being outdoors and enjoying this beautiful place that we live in is what I remember. And when I still do those things to this day, because I still do them, I always think about him.
Okay.
Like I always am like, oh, Brad would have loved this camp spot, or Brad would have loved this, hike or whatever it is.
Mm.
And that still brings me a lot of joy.
You mentioned about being open and willing to share your grief. I would ask you to share about what led up to Brad's transition from this world and his passing, what you recall of that time, and what
Mhm.
year was that?
So Brad passed on June 27th, 2022. As I mentioned, we had just moved into a brand new home and a brand new community. And he had been experiencing tightness in his chest. And I had recommended that he see a doctor. And he made an appointment to see a doctor. And unfortunately, he never made it to that appointment. So what happened was I was I work at home. He was outside, working in our new yard. And I took a break from conference calls and I found him face down in our front yard.
Mm.
And I called 911. I did CPR. It was pretty obvious, unfortunately, when I first found him that I knew he had already passed. But, myself and the paramedics certainly did a
Right.
heroic effort to bring him back. But, it was just, he suffered a massive heart attack. And that's how it ended. And it was really shocking because, as I mentioned, we were very active. And feel like we ate pretty healthy and all
Right.
the things that you would think maybe would be risks were not. So it was extremely shocking. And he was 50 years old when he passed.
Okay. And this is still the home that you're in now and still that yard.
Yes.
Have you ever wrestled with guilt in relation to Brad's passing? And if
Mhm.
so, how have you managed that?
Yeah, big time. Certainly immediately after I should have taken him to the ER when he expressed pain. I wish, should have gotten to the doctor sooner. He was notorious for being terrible going to the doctor, so
I'm
should have,
sorry,
should
like most men that are listening to this podcast,
have.
I'll just say the obvious. It's not like
Yeah,
we're not begging you to stay alive, but go ahead. Yeah.
right. Yeah,
I'm saying it for
exactly.
the
And
people in the back of the room, not anybody that's listening, to tell a friend.
yeah, exactly. I tell people all the time, I'm like, go to the doctor. It's not that hard. So I did deal with a lot of that grief. I would say my therapist helped me manage through that. She said, okay, like let's talk through those scenarios. Like you've told me a little bit about Brad. Like, what if you demanded he went to the doctor? What would he have done? I'm like, well, he probably would have said,
Oh,
okay, I will another time, so she just helped me understand that I think as humans, we often think we can control a lot more than we actually can. And just because he went to the doctor before that date, June 27th, still doesn't mean the outcome would have been. And so it's just I think just a reframe in my head of I could not change what happened. And Brad made some decisions about his health. And unfortunately, I've had to live with some of that, but that, I as a human could not influence and change that.
right. What do you call the first year after Brad no longer being here?
what do I call the first year?
recall in your life
Oh,
of that
recall,
first
sorry.
year? Sorry, my apologies.
I mean, I think the first 3 months were certainly a blur. I did the memorial a month after Brad passed to allow time for friends and family to get here. My brother and his family at the time of Brad's passing were actually on a vacation in Iceland.
Mm,
And they live on the East Coast. So it just was a lot of coordination. And so, and honestly, I wasn't ready to do it soon after. I was just kind of a wreck. And so it just gave me some time. And I had been to the therapist a few times and, had talked about the service and how I would get through it. And so we did it about a month after. So that first month, speaking of friends, I was never alone. I had a friend
okay.
at my house every day, every night for that first month. And then it was like, I always called it the new normal, right? Like I had to come back, I had to get back to work. I had to manage this house by myself. And so, it was extreme sadness. And then it morphed into extreme anger and rage. And that one I didn't see coming because I am not a angry person. I think people would describe me as pretty even keeled, pretty laid back. And I was just full of rage. And it wasn't I wasn't mad at Brad. I wasn't mad, but it was like life was
Yes.
just, I couldn't handle life. And I was just had no patience. I was irritable. The tiniest thing would like set me off, like I dropped the dog's bowl of food in the kitchen and would just explode into rage. So that was probably the hardest part of my grief, I would say, was the anger. And that came about probably 2 or 3 months after Brad passed.
Mhm.
And I worked through that. And then it was I like to call it the changing of the seasons. So summer was a blur, fall was a little bit better. And then all of a sudden it was winter. And, I live in the mountains in Colorado and it just snowed and snowed. It was a record breaking season of snow. And I love the snow and Brad loved the snow. And so I just sort of looked at it as a sign from Brad.
Okay.
Like, he's reminding me that I got to get out there and like
Okay.
live this life that we had planned to live together, but he's not here to do. So that was kind of the turning point. And that was about 6 months, I would say, after Brad passed that I really started to feel a little bit like myself again, and was really trying to embrace a lot of the activities and things that we used to do. And I did some of those alone. I, made new friends and new connections to do those with. And so, yeah, I think, the first year certainly were hard. The holidays were hard. About friend group, I think I had 4 invitations for Thanksgiving and Christmas. Like I had no lack of support. So that I'm extremely grateful for. And so it was day to day. But, the grief started to lift, I would
Okay.
say. The heaviness of the grief started to lift about 6 months or so after Brad passed.
Thank you. You mentioned about finding and connecting with friends that are widows and widowers. How are those relationships different than friendships that are not widows and widowers for you?
Oh, just a shared understanding, right? No emotion, no question is, I would say, off limits,
Yes.
or is take somebody like, oh my God, you're full of rage. Or like, I remember meeting my therapist actually put me in touch with another widow in town with permission, of course. And I remember having dinner with her. It was probably about maybe 6 weeks after Brad passed. And I asked her, because she didn't have a wedding ring on. And it was one of those questions. I was like, when do I take my wedding ring off? Do I have to take like, what is the norms around this? Like, I
Yes.
don't want to take it off. And she was like, then don't, and she told me her story of how, how that was for her. And so, we talked about it in the beginning of the podcast, a club you never wanted to join, but there's a shared understanding.
Yes.
You don't have to explain yourself and you can just say, today's a hard day, and they'll just nod and just be okay with that and not, well, why, or try to cheer you up, or all those things that people that haven't gone through what we've gone through do. And so it's okay. And it's okay if we just sit here and cry together.
Yeah.
So just an understanding.
Yes, I think those relationships are so powerful. You mentioned about living life. What prevented you from getting stuck or afraid of continuing living life?
I think I was stuck for a while, to be honest.
Okay.
And I think some of that just came from not, I remember saying, I don't feel like I have the stamina to
Mm.
do what I used to do. You know,
Grief is exhausting.
it's exhausting,
Yes.
exhausting. So the things that I like to do, as we talked about, are go for a hike, go for a bike, like active outdoor things. And I just couldn't do it. And so I did feel stuck for a while. And that was something I didn't want to be. You know,
Okay.
I didn't want, I didn't, I guess I was like, I'm 45 years old when Brad passed. My grandmother lived to be 95. You know, I could still have 50 years left on this earth or more, right? Like we don't know, you know, we might have 5 days, like no one knows what we have. But in my mind, it was like, how do I want to live those remaining years? You know, do I
Mm.
want to be stuck in this place or do I want to live again? And so I think certainly I was in a therapist's office within a week of Brad passing because I knew from the beginning that I was going to need help to get through this. You know, this was more than I had ever imagined or experienced in my life. And so I just my working with a therapist was really, really important to my recovery and my healing. And I would say I did feel stuck and I also figured out how to kind of move out of that as well.
I can relate to that. My first time seeing a therapist was the day before viewing Mark's body. And I too realized I was in uncharted territory. There are so many classes on how to prepare for marriage or how to prepare for children, heck, how to prepare for college and relocate.
Right.
I needed someone to guide me through
Mhm.
being a widow. I
Yeah.
never factored in living a life beyond Mark's existence. And everything in our life was planned between the two of us and what that would look like. And him no longer being here made life just like I feel like it was like I was in the matrix, like something just wasn't right anymore. I know I'm here, the sun keeps coming up,
Mhm.
but this no longer makes sense anymore.
Mhm.
And I
It's
needed
almost an
help.
out of body experience, right?
Yes.
Like you're looking down on yourself and you're like, I remember when I was in those moments of rage and like literally looking at myself from like the third person and being and thinking, you are totally out of your mind and like, you're totally acting irrationally.
Hmm.
But in my body, I couldn't like control it. And it's
Right.
yeah, it's a wild experience to say the
It
least.
is. And when you talk about being proactive and the things that you've learned, I believe you started shifting and being able to assist other people in this process. What was the turning point in you for that?
So, about a year and a half after Brad passed, I had some friends who tragically lost their son
Mm.
um, to a horrible situation, in a very sudden and horrible situation. And I remember, and what happened during that is I had friends and I had, the grieving mother say to me after the fact, you were the only one that knew, what to say, what not to say, how to be present. You were such a support to me. Even friends were like, "Oh my gosh, what should we do?" Which, and I was like, "Hey, like, they're surrounded by friend or family at the moment. Like, let's send our condolences. Well, it's the weeks and months after the funeral when
Yes.
we all need to show up." So, I think a lot of people just gave me a lot of great feedback on that situation. And in my career, I was senior marketing leader for 20 plus years. And one of the things that I loved in my career the most, and I said it all the time to my employees and people that I work with, was mentoring and coaching people. I love to work with young women who are trying to advance their career and helping them. And it was what really gave me the most satisfaction in my job. And so, after that year and a half, it was, coming up on well, no, it was coming up maybe a year, like a little bit over a year and a half. And I started feeling like I wanted to make a shift in my
Mhm.
career and I really wanted to lean into what I felt like I was passionate about, which is helping other people. And I felt like I had a lot to offer as a widow who's experienced it. And so I started taking courses in grief coaching, and I got my master grief certification, coach certification, and open my own business to start to help other widows as
Wow.
they work through their grief. And I focused on the coaching portion because of what we've talked about. I enjoy working with people who are ready. They want to live a life of joy and meaning again. They just don't know how, versus maybe people who are, maybe have some past trauma they're trying to work through. Like, I really think I try to focus on people who are working, moving forward, and how I can help them sort of build this life. A little bit of what I did in my career of helping other women grow their career and figuring out what are those actions and steps they need to take to get to where they want to be. I've sort of applied that to my grief coaching business.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I want to know, what is the difference between coaching someone and someone that would need to be with a mental health professional?
It's a great question that I get all the time. And I think somebody that probably needs to see a mental health professional is someone who's obviously considering hurting themselves, hurting someone else, somebody who potentially has past trauma that they're trying to get through, somebody who is struggling with complicated or long-term grief. Maybe there's something in their past that they're struggling. So I usually say, oftentimes a therapist, although that can help you move forward, will also focus on the things of your past and how the past has shaped you into who you are today. Whereas I think a grief coach is more focused on how do we move forward, right? So here's where we are today. Where do you want to be? Like, and maybe you don't know yet. Maybe it's like, sometimes it's like, I want to go to the grocery store. I want to get out of bed. It can be small goals in the beginning. I don't expect people to come
Taking
and
a
say,
shower every day again, because those
yeah,
are real goals.
that's 100%. First time I went to the grocery store, I left a cart of groceries and walked out because I couldn't do it.
Those things are real, yes.
Yeah. So I don't want to make it sound like, people that I work with come to me with this grand plan of where they want their life to be in 5 years, because we don't know in those first days, weeks, months. We're just trying
Somebody
to
just may
survive.
want to be able to sleep back in their bedroom again versus being on the couch. It depends.
Yeah. Yeah. I think people that they want to move forward, they want to heal,
Okay.
they want to take those small steps towards, healing from their grief, is really where I feel like can have an impact, and where I really enjoy coaching and working with people.
Thank you. Do you have discovery calls?
I do. Yes.
And what would that look like for someone? What would they expect to happen during that process?
Sure. So I do a free complimentary 30-minute consultation or discovery call. And typically I ask them, what brought them to me, what was their loss, how long ago did it happen, have they done to potentially heal themselves, if anything, what are they hoping to accomplish. I share a little bit of my philosophy, my background, my experience, my education. And I really try to use it as an opportunity for us at the end of the call to say, hey, we think this is a good match, right? Because to work with somebody and share your intimate thoughts and emotions and share that, they need to feel comfortable that I'm going to be the best person to help them and support them. And as I mentioned, I also want to make sure that I'm taking on clients that I can help. I don't want to take on a client that, maybe could benefit from a therapist or from a professional counselor, or, or somebody else, right? There's so many grief coaches in this world.
Right.
So that's typically how I structure the call. I try to keep it very, very open, very much a dialogue. I'd like to hear their story, and then I share about me. And then, I think at the end, it's like, is this something that, we think we want to continue and work together?
Do you work with people in person, or is it all virtual? Is there a mix?
A mix.
Okay.
Yep. So I do a lot of virtual through Zoom, and then I do work locally here in my community with some women.
Okay. As far as on Zoom, are there Is that worldwide? Is there a limit? And how does one, is that possible? Or are there limitations for where people are?
Yeah, I've typically worked with people within the US.
Okay.
Um, I don't know necessarily that I would say it's worldwide at this point. I
Okay.
still think I'm a little bit new to the process, so I've been just kind of keeping it domestically for now, but certainly open to those discussions.
How is the idea of working with people impacting your own grief journey?
I still feel like I'm learning a lot about my grief journey, and talking to other widows and what they're experiencing. It's like, oh yeah, I did experience that too. Maybe it's not something I think about, but just I still think I'm learning so much every day of everybody grieves. I already knew that, but everybody grieves differently. Nobody does it the same. I am incredibly humbled by people sharing where they are in their grief and what they're feeling. And I'm always, I don't know if fascinated is the right word, but it just, I'm just so intrigued by where people are. And I am passionate and highly motivated to figure out how to help them and how to
Okay.
help them move forward. Right. So I do draw on my personal experience, but I also recognize that there's a lot of other things that are happening for people. So I'm constantly trying to stay up to date on podcasts, on books, on articles, because there's so much to grief and it's so complicated and there's so many ways for people to heal and get better. And what works well for one person may not for the next. And so it's been enlightening for sure. And it's been, I think, also healing and obviously super rewarding.
Speaking of what works for some people and does not work for others, the idea of dating
Mhm.
as a widow, some people are, that's a hard stop. Some people, they're interested. What has been for you personally as it relates to dating and being a young widow, I'll say?
Yeah. I mean, I had the emotions of after Brad passed, I'll never be happy again. I'll never find joy. I'll never find anybody that could compare to Brad. And so, but I also would say at the same time, I would also say, I don't want to be alone. I loved
Mhm.
being married and I loved being in a partnership. So there was this dichotomy of like, I wanted to have someone in my life, but I just didn't think I'd ever find anybody worthy, quite frankly.
Right.
And so I certainly wasn't thinking about it for a long time after Brad passed. It was probably a good 7 or 8 months after Brad passed that I started to feel like, I'm awfully lonely. And, if anything, I just like to find like companionship, and so I just stayed open to it. I didn't go on, I mean, I was still very early in my widowhood, so I didn't go on, dating apps or anything of that nature at that point. But I was open to meeting someone should that opportunity happen.
Okay.
So
And did it?
I was open to it. And I did meet somebody. So it was about 9 months after Brad passed, and it worked out great because it was a friend of a friend. He was friends with a lot of people that I was friends with, but I didn't really know him. He was sort of like an acquaintance that I kind of knew from, parties or get-togethers. And I ran into him in my hometown, and he said, "Oh, I'd love to come up and ski up here. I've never skied here before." And so he came up and we skied, and it was obviously we had a lot in common because we had a lot of friends in common,
Right.
and so it just sort of blossomed. And I would say it was sort of rooted in friendship from the beginning. And I just kept telling myself a little bit of what Brad always said: live in the moment, and if today is a good day, then just keep going one day at a time. You don't have to plan that you're going to marry this person or this is going to be the
Okay.
last person of your life. Just be in the moment and enjoy the connection and enjoy the friendship. And it definitely developed into much more than that.
Nice. I am just excited for you that you are still writing Emily's story. You are still living your journey and you are holding Brad close as you do that. And I think that's important to be able to honor our loved ones as we are still living our own lives. When you thought about having this conversation, were there some points that you wanted to cover that we did not go over or something we may have left out at this point?
No, I mean, we talked a little bit about the proactive nature of grieving that I
Mm.
adopted and I advocate for. We talked about resiliency. I think the other thing that I, just wanted to share is hope. I know when I was
Mm.
in the early stages, I just needed to hear from somebody who had been on this journey and came out the other side. And
Yeah,
whatever that looks like, right? For those people that don't want to ever get married again, or they do want to get married again, or they want to have another partner, like whatever that journey is, it's like they found happiness again. Because
yeah.
I was in such a dark place, feeling like I'm never going to be happy again. My life is over, like
I
literally
feel
feeling.
like that. Yes.
And because as you said, we were a partnership and we did everything. All of my future plans included Brad.
Right.
So then all of a sudden it was like, well, what's my future now? All these things we wanted to do together and places we wanted to visit and things we wanted to do. It's important for widows to hear from us who have walked the journey and can sit here today and say, A, I still miss him.
Oh, yes.
B, I'll never get over it because I always tell people that I'm never getting over it. And C, I am happy. Like it's okay. It's okay
Yes.
to be happy. It's okay to have joy. And it's also okay to still miss them and wish they were here. And that was a hard one for me to understand for a long time. When I started dating, Lion is his name. It was this weird dichotomy of like really caring for this new person, but still loving Brad. And am I cheating on Brad? There's moments of feeling like I was cheating on him. What do other people think about me? And it's an interesting dichotomy, but I think the analogy that I have heard and has resonated is if you lost a child and you had another child, you would still love the old child, even though you have a new child. And I think we talked about divorcees and well, you're supposed to be over the ex before you date again. But in marriage, you don't get over it. You don't get over your late spouse or your late, partner. You learn to carry that grief forward. So, I think that's also a message I just wanted to share with your listeners.
What is the name of your practice?
Yeah, it's Awaken and Renew Grief Coaching.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
And I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. My website is awakenrenewcoaching.com. I'm on LinkedIn. So yeah, I'm out there and just really passionate and about helping other women and other widows. And I'm honored and humbled by those that choose to work with me.
Nice. I have asked you a lot of questions. I'll give you an opportunity by chance to have any questions of me or something you're curious about.
Yeah. I was curious about what prompted you talked to me a little bit about asked me how my coaching business has helped me in my grief. What prompted you to want to start a podcast for widows, and how has that helped you in your grief journey?
Thank you. That's a good question. So I want to add something to that. Widowhood Real Talk with Tina is a registered 501c3 nonprofit.
Mhm.
And underneath that umbrella, we have three different lanes in which we support people. One is with social media content, and under that umbrella is the podcast. Because where do we go when we want information? We go on some social media platform or we go to YouTube and we Google it. And when we're grieving, we're often isolated and feel like if we're isolated, who's really going to listen to our questions? How do we find information? So between the podcast and the social content across 99 different countries and over 3.4 million views, I know that people are lonely and they are looking for information. And then from there is resources where on our website you can go and find different books under different titles. When we have our grief support group, we have one exclusively for men once a month. And then we have an open grief support group. And then we have coming up August 4th to the 10th, Walk for Love. Then we have an event called Surviving the Winter Holidays. And then we have an event preparing for the winter holidays with mental health professionals. And so between the social content, the resources and events, all those together create a community of people that are grieving and being able to support each other. The turning point for me was my current husband had a cousin that passed, and the wife posted about his birthday. And I knew for me what that felt like the first birthday after Mark passed. And I reached out to her and I asked her, did she want to talk? And she was like, no. I said, you sure? And I believe she called me before the text like sent. And we were on the phone way past my bedtime. But I felt like it was an opportunity to pay it forward to people who had been there for me, other widows, when I needed an ear, because like you said before, I don't have to validate my feelings. I don't have to explain it. They already get it. And when I got off the phone with her, I felt a prompting from God, like, what are you going to do with the next person? How are you going to continue to help? And through prayer and concentration and looking that developing this nonprofit was that vehicle to do that. And Widowhood Real Talk with Tina is not a faith-based organization. We meet someone at their point of need, no matter what their faith is, sexual identity. It was just my faith that led me to prompt to do that.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that is a calling that some of us have is,
Yeah.
we've survived this horrible experience, and how do we get forward? And how long was that? You mentioned you were remarried. So how long was that after Mark passed that you kind of had
Mark
that?
passed March 11, 2017. I remarried in February 2022.
Okay. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, I never would have thought that this would be where I would find myself in this journey. But like yourself, this is not what I started with. I started with trying to make sure I wasn't stuck in crazy or how to find joy. Again, about being proactive, about identifying who I was as Tina. It took me so much just to say my name without saying Tina and Mark. The
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
practice of that,
Yeah.
just a lot of the little things that aren't big to other people, but they can be devastating when
Yeah.
you were on this journey. And giving myself time to connect with other widows, find myself. I wanted to be in a space that I would want somebody else to present themselves to me if I was still healing and still working through some of the heaviest part of this grief. I didn't feel like it was fair to connect with someone else until I was in a place that I felt like I was ready for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is an individual thing. But I also had and still have two children. They're adults, but their dad is no longer here. It changes the dynamics of parenting. And so those things I needed to figure out priorities for myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that makes complete sense. I love how you said that, of like, you needed to be ready for yourself to be able to help others. And I think one of the things I certainly struggle with, what resonated you said, is I kept saying we for the longest time, and then it was like, okay, I have to start saying I, and that was hard, and
Yes.
now I'm a we again, and I still find myself saying I. So I'm like, oof, I gotta be careful, I gotta switch back. But yeah, your identity. I was reading this book called The Grieving Brain, and it was just such a great book. And it talks a lot about the science of your brain, the science of grieving, and like actually the pathways that your brain creates. And
Mm,
so part of grieving is having to rewire your brain, because you're so used to having that person in your life. You're used to waking up and seeing them. You're used to them walking in the door at 6 o'clock at night. Like, there's so many things that you don't even think about. And so you have to learn to your literally your brain and your body has to like rewire
yes.
itself to think about it differently. And to me, that was really powerful. Like, in my grief was like understanding why I was feeling the way I was feeling, and that I wasn't crazy.
That was very big for me. The research I was doing, I never heard the term grief brain or grief fog. And
Yeah.
to understand how my prefrontal cortex assumes that this is trauma and my fight
Mhm.
and flight response is more pronounced than what it was before. I'm a project manager. I'm a retired officer in the United States Army. I'm used to being strategic. and to think I could make very basic decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And in my head, I was going, well, Mark died. I'm still here. Why can't I decide stuff? I
Yeah.
needed to understand why, because that was impacting me and making me feel even more unhinged. But when I understood that that was a part of the physical response and is scientifically proven, then I'm like, okay, I can lean in and relax to this. This isn't wrong. I didn't mess this up. This is what it looks like.
That's right. It's very empowering,
Yes.
like, okay. And, I have widows all the time that will tell me how they're feeling, and they'll say, do other people feel this way? Am I the only one? And it's like, no,
Right.
you're not. So it's a journey. It's a journey,
Yes.
and we're all on it.
It is. Emily, thank you so much. If you don't have any other questions for me, I'll let you close this out to our audience with your final comment.
Great. Well, thanks so much for having me. I've really enjoyed our conversation, really enjoyed about Brad and what an incredible human he was, and sharing about, what I'm doing now in terms of the joy I found in a new relationship and being able to pass forward what I've learned and, and my experience. And so, I am at Awaken Renew Grief, awakenrenewcoaching.com. My business is Awaken and Renew Grief Coaching, and I'd be honored to meet with anybody who might be interested in learning how to, if what I've said today has resonated, learning how to move forward and find that joy and meaning in your life while honoring your late husband, wife, or partner.
Thank you for being here, Emily.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for spending another episode with Widowhood Real Talk. If you found the contents of today helpful, share the episode to anyone you know who may need it. Subscribe to the show and tune into Widowhood Real Talk each week. Then visit widowhood-realtalkwithtina.org to join the community and access additional resources. Remember, you are not alone in this journey.